My name is Tom Proietti, and I'm the resident scholar in media at St. John Fisher College. This is my second trip to St. John Fisher College. I helped start the communication program back here in 1968, and we began that soon. And then in 1980, I made a move on to another part of my life. And a major part of my time at St. John Fisher has been spent with a guy who's currently the president of this institution. He's one of the most important people in my life, instrumental in getting me to come back here. And his name is Dr. Donald Bain, the president of St. John Fisher College. Don, welcome.
Thank you, and welcome home.
Good. It's good to it's good to be. You made that possible too. What I want to do is, I was thinking, you just said 38 years. You and I were just talking a little bit before the program. 38 years. Can you talk a little bit about your first impressions of when you arrived on the St. John Fisher College campus?
Right. Well, it was a lot smaller, and
how much smaller?
well, I think we probably had 95 full-time teaching faculty and a much thinner administrative staff, and I think overall that we're probably close to 200 at the most, 200 employees.
200 faculty.
200 total employees.
Total employees. Okay.
Oh yeah, in 1975.
Oh, in 75.
75.
Right.
We had 3,500 alum, and we had about 1,100, just a little less, 1,100 students. So
Wow.
in terms of metrics, 1975, 1,100 students, 200 total employees, and 3,500 alums. As of 1 June, this past, June 1st, 2012, we have over 4,000 students, over 500 employees, and almost 25,000 alums.
Amazing. Absolutely incredible. And you've been a part of that ever since
75.
75. I remember the first day you arrived on campus, and you probably remember seeing me, and I think I looked quite a bit different, and you looked quite a bit different, and we thought we came from two completely different worlds, but it turned out, what was it that that so many people share that's an affection and affinity for St. John Fisher?
Well, I think we wouldn't have been here if we didn't want to be here.
And that's true, and one of the things people watching today who are younger don't realize, in the 1970s, it was much easier to get a job than it is in the 2000s.
As a matter of fact, I finished my PhD in history in 1974, right out of the gate, had a job in South Carolina, university down there. But we're from the area, wanted to get back home. And within a year, I had an offer from the college, interviewed with Father Lavery, Father Dorsey, Father Pupor, and next thing you know, we're back home. And that was 38 years ago, and a couple of kids, and now a lot of grandchildren. So I think probably the college then, and probably now, it was small enough where people could get to know one another.
Right.
There was a tone, I think, of camaraderie, collegiality, civility, probably, that brought people together. My guess is, thinking back then, our offices weren't too far apart. I would use, once in a while, some of the audiovisual stuff. Remember Alistair Cook's America series, so I'd be up here, I'd see you and Scoop and Dennis O'Brien and some of the gang. Skip Battaglia, I remember he was sort of part of that. Louis Bettino, who still one of my best friends. So I think we were young, but we also were optimistic about the future. And the personalities were such that, and I'll certainly speak for you, sort of easy to get along with. Interested in other people, and you look at somebody. Hey, I'm Don Bain. I'm Tommy Proietti. You shake hands, and it makes it much easier to collaborate professionally if personally you get along. And I think that was part of the chemistry.
I think one of the ultimate tributes from me to you, and you know how many students I was advising at that time, is that I would consciously look for a class taught by Don Bain. And I think that's the ultimate tribute to a great teacher. And I think one of the things I realized right off the bat was you're passionate about teaching. And as the president of the college, can you kind of reflect on back to the 70s and maybe like the first day of classes or the first semester you were here? What drove you into that passion for teaching?
I like the subject matter.
Sweet.
That had a lot to do with it.
That does help, doesn't it?
And I've always been interested in examining the past through a number of vehicles. Sometimes it's film, sometimes it's radio, sometimes it's biography, or good, well-written history texts. Because to me, you figure out and you find out how it all ends. How somebody's life ends, how a regime in a country ends, what happens during a war. You know what the end is. And what you're doing is trying to study and understand what led up to the conclusion that you already know.
Right.
So that's important. What I also found as a very young historian is that by understanding the past, by making those linkages and connections between events, weather, personalities, timing, technology, by trying and to some extent understanding those connections, it became fascinating to try to anticipate the future. A little known but interesting subject from, well, it was a few years ago anyway, but I was a visiting scholar in 1989 down at the Defense Intelligence Agency, and had some interactions with the folks out at Langley CIA. And at the time, I was told that in the Directorate of Intelligence, which is the largest single directorate at CIA back then and still is, the discipline most represented in the PhDs, and they're all PhDs, the discipline most represented was history. And I found that shocking. I would have figured it was.
I'm sitting here stunned by
a
what
lot
you
of more
just said.
cutting edge,
Yeah.
and they would, in this lecture that I listened to at DIA, they quoted Shakespeare from The Tempest, who said, "What's past is prologue." And people who have an ability to sort out and to some extent understand the past can help anticipate the future. Nobody's got a crystal ball. Nobody's got that kind of clairvoyance. But the whole point, and I'm thinking of the unfortunate events of General Petraeus the last few days,
Right.
which got me thinking about it in response to your question. The whole point of an intelligence operation or apparatus or department in any government is to be able to anticipate the capabilities and intentions of a potential adversary, an adversary, and often even friends. So to anticipate that future, not being able to see it with total clarity, but to anticipate probabilities.
I would say it's not a prediction, it's a probability.
It's an estimate.
Yeah, right. Right.
And that feeds into policymakers,
Right.
Who then advise in national security environment, the president, the joint chiefs, and so forth. So I guess while that wasn't something that was especially interesting to me at the time, I think is that ability to get a little deeper insight into human nature. It's like reading a novel. You get into somebody's head when you read a novel.
Right.
And it's not only the content and subject of the novel, but it's how the novel is presented, the cadence of the prose, the way the plot unfolds, the character development. So reading was always important to me, and reading history, which dealt not only with biography of individuals, but also societies and culture, was fascinating. Well, having been somehow attracted to that, it seemed to me very natural that I'd want to write about it, read about it, and I still try to read as much as I can. I love to read. And then teach it. And I found in the classroom, if I was able to shape those courses that I wanted to teach, which I could in a small department, teach just about whatever you want, the passion, and I'm looping back now to your original question, the passion came from the fascination I had with the material I was talking about. And to me, it was always a challenge to be able to reach in the back of the room and those folks sitting in the back bench and keep them engaged, keep the eye contact, and help them understand why the material we were analyzing was important. Why is it important to you? And I can't tell you dozens of alums from the 70s and 80s who I meet in my travels, and by George, they remember some of that.
Oh, they
stuff.
sure do. And I was just going to tell you, I was on a plane a couple weeks ago, and I was sitting next to a guy, and I happened to have my card, my St. John Fisher card, and I handed it to him, and he said, I remember you from the 1970s. He said, in fact, I think I had a class with you, which meant I didn't leave that much of an impression. And I said, so who was your favorite teacher at the time? He said, well, I was a history major. And he said, Dr. Bain was my man. He was my guy. And I don't want to name this guy because I don't think he wants his name out there. But what is it about Don Bain that was so engaging in a classroom?
Well, it certainly wasn't any natural talent or good looks. I think, if anything, I was comfortable with the material. I had a level of confidence in it. I always thought about what I wanted to say before I went into a class. I didn't read from notes, but I had, in a 50-minute lecture, probably 5 points I wanted to make. And I would start the class by telling them, here's what I'm going to talk about. Here's how it relates to the readings. I give them the 5 points. And I talk about them. Sometimes I got to 3, sometimes it was 6, but most of the time I was on point with what that day, that lecture was going to deal with. And then at the end I tell them a little summary. But during the class, and a lot of those were lectures, they weren't seminars, although eventually I taught upper level seminars, which were fascinating and I really enjoyed a lot. But I think I was so enthused about it. I thought it was so important to my life that I studied historical examples and case studies. I mean, talk about Harvard Business School. What do they study? They study cases.
Case studies, right?
Cases. What do they do in law school? It's all cases, legal cases, major decisions. History's the same, except you pick, and say a case in American foreign policy. Select some that represent military, diplomatic, perhaps economic interests that the nation had, and how they projected their policies and protected their interests. I mean, that organized into categories that's understandable, showing the linkage, is fascinating to me. And I just wanted other people, younger people, to be able to share that, not only the enthusiasm, but the knowledge that it brings, the capability, the skill that it can bring to everyday life.
Yeah.
So I'd go in there, and I always had the challenge of the backbenchers, keeping them awake, engaging them, and then asking them, you're sitting here for 50 minutes, you're listening to me, what are you getting out of it? Answer my question.
Yeah,
and
you were that way. I knew you were that way, right?
And help them do that,
right,
with some humor. And if they didn't understand it, if they weren't getting it, perhaps backtracking a little bit, figuring out why.
Right.
And hoping that they could have those insights into the human condition that I thought some of those classes would be able to provide to them as a foundation later in their lives, when they perhaps confronted a situation that was not analogous. I mean, they weren't going to, have to deal with what Woodrow Wilson did, or Lincoln, or Jefferson, or anyone, but perhaps. But at least all of those examples were models. They were case studies of human beings trying to deal with perplexing problems. Right. And I never tired of telling them. It's probably the single most important thing I ever said to the literally thousands of students in my classes. And it only makes sense to them, I think, the little bit older they get. Isaac Newton was admitted to the Royal Academy of Science. And he was admitted there around 1725 for having deduced the third law of mechanical physics, which is for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So he's sitting there, he's getting his medals and his hat and everything, and they asked him, Sir Isaac, how'd you come up with the third law? And he said, I just kept thinking about it.
Yeah. Which is something, one of the other things about you was that it was not only in the classroom. I remember walking by your office, and there was always a student in your office. And even today, I still hear students, I know students still contact you for letters of recommendation.
They do, yeah.
And whatnot. What's the magic in Don Bain, and also it's kind of the magic and the culture of St. John Fisher College that does that? I'm
sure it's more the culture than any individual. Certainly me, and that's not being self-deprecating or unnecessarily.
No, but you did open yourself up to students in such a way so that they always felt very comfortable with you. And I can't tell you how many times my advisees would say, "I want to take another course with this guy."
Peter Hersha. Still keep
one
in
of our
touch
best.
with him.
I know.
Still keep in touch.
And
with
so
him.
do I.
What was that, class of 77?
77, right.
He's an attorney, very successful,
brilliant,
great kid.
Yep.
Peter Ruffner was another one. I just spoke to him the other day. Robin DeWind.
Yeah.
That was a student.
Yeah. I was just with Robin on Friday.
I'm not sure, other than always having a sincere respect for our students, a belief in what I was doing, and a real delight in talking about the subject,
Yeah.
and thinking to myself at least, and trying to convince others that it was worthy to spend the time that it would take to discipline the mind and try to acquire those lessons of the past that they could help in shaping their own lives. You know, as a president, I talk a lot about, people say, what's the mission of the college and so forth, and I'm working on that. And you know, this is my ninth year.
We're all working on that.
This is my ninth year as president, but I often say, always start with first principles. And the first principle is the founding Brazilian fathers. And they had a philosophy. And the philosophy was to teach virtues, not values. Values are so well worn, although they can be valuable, but virtues. And the virtues are to teach goodness, discipline, and knowledge. Well, those are wonderful. You can't argue with those.
Right.
And they're timeless.
Right.
I add to that after stating it. I say, and what we're really about within that philosophy is helping men and women build lives, create careers, and serve the community. Yeah. And I came up with that 38 years ago. Build lives, create careers, serve the community. And whether it was in a classroom, truly believing, perhaps deluding myself, but believing that somehow I was making an impression.
No, you were making a great impression.
Sometimes.
Yeah. No, you were.
Listen, Tommy, I always said, if I ever forgot what it was like to be 18 years old on the first warm day of spring,
right.
That's it.
I remember seeing you one day on you had a Friday afternoon seminar, and it must have been probably around 1979 or 1980, and we had an absolutely gorgeous day, and you were supposed to have 12 students in there, and you said 6 showed up. I think I did okay today.
Hey, if you're batting 500 in the majors, you're a hero, right?
You did all right. You did fine. So at what point did Don Bain move from being classroom teacher to Don Bain becoming an academic leader? Because this is my take. I'm going to give you a real quick one on this, is that frequently we lose the best teachers to administrative positions. And I find that troubling. It happened. I think it happened to me at way too young an age. And tell me about that path a little bit.
Well, I think Jack Pelvino often kids about the fact that he and I are not traveling kind of guys when it comes to our careers. We planted ourselves, this is our home, and we stayed with it. And that's an interesting analogy.
It is. That's a good one.
And although, while a professor, I had an NEH at Yale, I did the Harvard Institute of Educational Management, sabbaticals down in Washington, this was home. And at every point, when it came time to finish the fellowship or the tour of duty, I'd turn to Meg and the kids and let's go home, let's go home. And we did. And looking back, those were always the right decisions. I think that the opportunity to do something a little different, to be in a position where I could help good people do good things, meant a lot to me. I know how much I appreciated it when, as a professor, I was able to get assistance, whether it was in teaching, the right classroom, materials that I needed, travel money, support for some of the scholarship I did. I wanted to be able to do that. I wanted to be able to help students, too. I wanted to be able to build some things. I had some dreams about how we could add to the infrastructure of the college. And having a lot of trust in my academic colleagues, and knowing that they had a purpose and a program of study that intellectually and scholastically would support the student body. When I became president, and when I became provost, having the thought of being able to help faculty, students, and staff, and then when I became president, the idea emerged that we really needed some infrastructure additions to the campus. And that coincided with what was probably a rather uncontemplated response when somebody said, what are your plans for a capital campaign? And I thought, well, the last one, sort of, you want to double what the last one was. So I said 50 million. And there were times during the Vision 2020 $50 million capital campaign, which we're very close to finishing, as you know, successfully, I might add, thanks to just tremendous number of wonderful people. But I really wondered what I got myself into. But the infrastructure, and whether it's in an office, you're walking around the campus, and it was just so delightful to be able to provide. Since September of 2004, we put up the campus center, we put up a new dormitory, the Policini track and field, which is just fantastic, the Wegman School of Pharmacy, the Wegman School of Nursing, the Scalny Center, LaChase Commons. How many years did I want to get that road out of there, redo it? Finally, redoing the face of Lavery,
Right.
And so many other projects, including most recently that we're right next door to here, the Salerno Center for American Enterprise. So I thought the academic professionals know what they're doing, highly skilled, trained, well prepared. So as a person coming out of that academic environment, I felt I didn't have to pay as much attention to that. Right. I just trusted the men and women who are in that operation. And I was able to devote some of my time to, frankly, institutional development, which is to say trying to find people, ways, grants, foundations, individuals who would support us. The key there is, having been at the college for quite a while,
right.
It's very easy to talk about it. I had a regular circuit, I still do, where I visited regularly throughout the year, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Washington, Atlanta, Naples, of course, Palm Beach, and then in other instances, other parts of Florida, the Northeast, sometimes in Chicago. And there are alumni groups there. So I meet with them, maybe take one or two out for dinner, give them an update. There's sort of a little system, I guess you could say. I give them an update,
It's
answer
the Don Bain
questions,
style. It really is your style.
have a nice meal, keep in touch with them. And it's not only delightful to meet men and women who now are adults, they have kids. I mean, I've seen, you probably have too, children of the kids we taught in college here.
Don, I've had the experience of a student coming to me saying, you taught my grandfather, or you taught my grandmother. So I'm at that point in my career.
That's how much older you are than me. But that was just so rewarding. And it just seemed, because I have so many people that are just incredibly talented and willing to support that support the travel, support the work, the fundraising, the public part of what we try to bring to potential students, families, organizations, and donors. So it just seemed a natural outgrowth of the teaching. It's easy to talk about it. It's easy to represent it. I hope well, because it's so much a part of my life. And that of my family. I mean, our kids were baptized here, first communions, go back with the priests. I think a lot of the alums appreciate the fact that, as with you, it was Father Lavery who hired me. Father Dorsey, who gave me his blessing. Father Pupor, who just passed away, as you know, at 90, was the chairman of the department. And I think a lot of alums feel sort of a connection with that.
Well, you've managed to maintain that connection. And one of the things that I even when I was not here, before I came back, I could send an email to Don Bain, the president of St. John Fisher College, and expect an answer within 20 minutes. And that, I have to pay a compliment to you, because I think that's the highest form of engagement with people who have an attachment to St. John Fisher, and I think you represent that so well.
I try to.
And you do, and I think the circuit you just described too. I think there's a whole group of people, not just around this country, but even really around the world now, who equate a lot of St. John Fisher with Don Bain. What's that feel like to be like in that position?
I don't think about it that much.
You don't?
Doesn't seem. No, it's just at the moment when I'm visiting a place and I get to see them and talk with them, and some that I didn't know. I mean, there's a lot.
Right.
But what we share in common is the college, the campus,
Right.
memories of individuals who were here, and the idea behind the college. That's what we share. And that goes back to your very first question. What connected us 38 years ago?
Oh, a
when
long
we first
time
met
ago.
What did it? And there is that, I don't know, undefinable chemistry that somehow there's a person who understands you, is
Well, I had
is
already
willing
been.
to put up with you.
Yeah, I had already been here 7 years, and I could tell the first day I met you that you were a perfect fit for this institution. I remember seeing Father Pupor and telling him, I said, I think you've got a young and rising star there. And he was pretty sardonic and not the most pessimist or not the most optimistic person
Yes,
in the world
yes.
on some things. And he said, time will tell. That was so much of Father Pupor's personality. Time has told. Look at you, president of St. John Fisher College.
I'm embarrassed. I enjoy myself so much, and I'm just so pleased to be able to have the chance to do it.
Well, how much longer do you see yourself doing this?
Oh, most of the people in my family, and they're pretty long-lived, have a little tradition. We all work till we die, and I'm not sure if I'll make it that far. I suppose I will. At least a few more years as president.
And what's your grand vision for Fisher? What's missing yet from this place
I
that's
think
not in place?
every president should bring something that's truly, by any measure, transformative. And we can look back at the 6 presidents we've had, and it's pretty easy in a chronology to figure out what they did and what was truly transformative. And I think I had an awfully fortunate start with God's blessing and Bob Wegman to have those gifts that he gave to me to start what I thought, with Bob Loss as the inspiration initially, the School of Pharmacy. I mean, that has been transformative. And then the School of Nursing. And then I think that kind of success builds in itself. So going forward, I would think probably the next president, I'd like to see something truly transformative for his or her administration. What could that be is the question, really, behind your...
That's what everyone asks me, too.
Well, I for a while, as you know and some of the viewers know, had the idea of starting a school of law in Rochester. And I have to say, I think it was a very good idea. We're the only upstate city that does not have a law school, number one. Despite the vagaries of the marketplace, there's always going to be a lawyer demand, increasing regulation, and especially since I wanted to have the actual campus in the city to serve underrepresented populations. We did 2 studies. Both studies were very positive. On the other hand, it's very costly to start a law school. And I just made a judgment that our resources were best used in other projects. And I don't regret that decision. That was right at the time that law schools started, frankly. Applications were dropping, and it didn't look like an area that at that moment we wanted to move. I think a law school in the city of Rochester, the community of Rochester, at St. John Fisher College is a natural, and I think it'll happen. Not sure it'll happen on my watch, but I think eventually it will. And I think it'll be a proud institution in this community that'll serve well the people who need the services of good lawyers. As you know, in our hometown, Williamson, for 4 terms, I was a judge out there. And while I was doing my PhD, I studied law and had enough background, at least, where I could be on the bench. And I addressed the Monroe County Bar Association. A lot of our alums are, as you know, we have over 420 attorneys and judges in the Justinian Order, which is made up of Fisher undergraduates and graduates. And I think there's just all the indications point in the right direction. It's going to take the commitment to find the resources to do that and go through the process, as we did with pharmacy and with nursing. I mean, we know how to do it.
Yes.
We've done it. We know how to do market studies. I learned after a long time what a ROI was. What's an ROI? I'm a simple country judge. What's an ROI? Well, it's the return of the investment.
Right.
President Bain, if you want to put X number of dollars into this project, what's the return going to be? So I had to learn very quickly a lot of financial and economic terms to make sense to the people I was dealing with.
Well, you know what? We're going to let you think about those things a little bit more. We've pretty much run out of time.
Wonderful. I'm
Just so want to thank
grateful
you.
for the chance to talk to you.
Yeah.
I think we could use another day or two, but I hope this is a good start, and I hope it serves your viewers well. And again, thank you for coming back. God bless you.
Thank
And
you.
welcome home. I mean that sincerely.
I know you do.
Anything you need, door's always open.
I know it
And,
is.
I'd love to see you again soon.
Thanks, Donald. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.